All right, so we are now right now 360 participants almost. And I would like to say welcome to you all to this information meeting for the grant for Center of Excellence. And I want to start with a look at the agenda and some practicalities. There will be a presentation divided in two parts. Mattias Marklund, our Secretary General for Natural and Engineering Sciences, will talk about the background of the call and the aims and purpose of the call. And then after that, I will continue with a few slides on requirements and our evaluation process. And following that, we will have a short break and then have a Q&A session. So a few practicalities. The presentations will be in English. This meeting will be recorded and made available on YouTube afterwards. You can ask questions by using the Q&A function. And I would like to ask you to wait with submitting your questions until after the presentations. Some of you have submitted questions already before the meeting, and we have looked at them, and they will be answer to those will be included in the presentation. So hopefully most of your questions will be answered already. So hold on with asking the questions until after the presentations. And also remember that we are a lot of people in this meeting, so we will not be able to answer all your questions. We will select questions that are of more general interest. We don't have the possibility to answer all very detailed questions on stuff going on at certain universities or things like that. So keep them general, please. And everyone can see all the submitted questions. So before you type your question, you can have a look through if someone else has already asked the question. If you think a question is interesting, you use the upvote button to indicate that this is something you want to have answered. And lastly, please avoid repeating questions that are already there. Okay, so now I will turn it over to you, Mattias.
Excellent. So I will start sharing my screen here as well. Can you see the presentation now properly? Hope it's okay. So this is our sort of overview of this grant for Center of Excellence, which is based essentially on the Research and Innovation Bill from the government, the last one we had in 2020. And as you can see from the front page here, we have a call deadline for November 22nd this year. And then there's a evaluation period after that as well. But I'll continue, the more details will come. So as I told you, this is based on a government mandate that came through the Research and Innovation Bill. And the idea behind this is to create long-term support for research and education environments. And they should be centers of highest quality in order to contribute to Swedish research in such a way that we continue to be international leading, or even create new fields then that are international leading. Important also is that they should cover all the scientific fields. So everything from art to engineering science, for instance, should be covered by this this grant. And they should also, these centers should also contribute to higher education and the societal need for competence, which we all know that research does in general, of course. So this is sort of the frame that we have to work with. This is these are the prerequisites that we have. So The aim of this call is, I'll read out this quotation: to support the build-up and development of environments that promote research collaborations on a joint theme and contribute to higher education. So this is not a project grant. I can't stress that enough. It's different from a regular project grant. It's support for organizational structure. And the good thing is that since this is not a regular project grant, this is not in conflict with previous attained or grants attained in the future. You can have a project grant, for instance, or grants from other organizations in general, and still apply for this grant. So it's not excluding any previous or future efforts concerning grant applications, which is a bit different from other types of grants that we usually delegate. Okay. So what is a center of excellence? We got this proposal on our desk, so to say, from the government, and we try to make an outward look into the world to see what people have done in other places. For instance, in Denmark, where centers of excellence is quite prolific. And the thing that we wanted to have as a main definition is that this center for research and teaching should be built around a central theme or a central question. This is the sort of most important part of the whole proposal. And this kind of central theme or central question could be of various types. It could be something like the origins of life, or grand questions like that. The questions could also be slightly more specialized, of course, than that. But the point of having such an overall central theme is that it makes it possible to develop new interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, cross-disciplinary research fields. Because when you try to respond to such large questions or central themes, you need competence from different directions of research. I should say that we define the term multidisciplinary or cross-disciplinary in quite loose terms. So it doesn't require that we follow sort of the general dichotomy of the Swedish universities when it comes to faculties and departments, etc. I mean, it is possible for if a mathematician who's doing graph theory is collaborating with someone who's doing algebraic topology, for instance, that could also be envisioned to be interdisciplinary or cross-disciplinary. If you aim this at a central theme or question. Also, this center should be active within higher education, which means that it should be involved in master's and doctoral education, which comes as, of course, as a natural byproduct in some sense of what is to come in my next description slide. It should also actively communicate or involve society in these activities, and that could be anything from interacting with industry or doing schoolwork or these kind of things. So this kind of outreach activities as a part of this center of excellence as well. In order for this to function, we have a few sort of requirements on this center of excellence structure. It should offer a program activity within this theme, and a program activity can be different things. It could be workshops, it could be seminars, it could be loosely held sort of meetings at the university, for instance. It's not prescribed how these program activities should be defined, because it would look very different depending on what kind of field you're working in. So a program activity is something which engage a number of researchers, maybe coming from different fields, to answer sort of particular questions or work around on part of the theme that is sort of defining this center of excellence. We also would like this center to attract researchers from different established research disciplines, and this should be done by getting them to be involved during shorter or longer periods. So these people who are not the PIs then are rather people that you can invite to this Center of Excellence. You may have people that you think are experts in a certain field that you would like to collaborate with. Then you can invite them to this Center of Excellence in order for them to work with you and create perhaps new proposals or new research directions during this time. And shorter or longer periods, that's also something which is up to the applicants to decide how they want to sort of distribute this over this 5-year period that we have to begin with. It can also cover one of the components listed there as in point form. So international visiting researchers, for instance, that's of course, you can recruit someone which is very high ranking for a period of time and pay their salary. You can also have graduate schools within this program. And you can also recruit international established or to be established junior researchers. And here we define junior researchers up to 7 years after PhD. And of course, there should be an open announcement for those positions as well. So, yes. So these program activities, which is central for the functioning of the Center of Excellence, is to create opportunities for researchers from different disciplines to interact on this central theme or the central question which defines the Center of Excellence. And of course, this can be done in many different ways. You can have small workshops where you work on a certain sub-theme within this question that you have. It could be that you invite individual researchers to discuss things with PhD students, for instance. And there are so many forms that this can take place. I mean, if you can be inspired, for instance, by the Kavli Institutes in the US, who has program activities of certain forms, but that's just one example. So these examples that we have here are lectures, seminars, courses, or workshops, and these can be distributed over longer or shorter periods of time, of course, as well. So I now give the word to Christian again. So stop sharing my screen.
All right, thank you, Matthias. First of all, I see that we had a raised hand somewhere, and we will only answer questions that comes in through the Q&A function. So we don't have the possibility to really follow the raising of hands. Okay. So I will continue by talking about some additional requirements for applying and also how we plan to assess the applications. So some additional requirements. You can only be part of one application, either as the main applicant or as a participating researcher. And in addition to the applicant, there has to be between 2 and 4 participating researchers invited to the application. So you have to be a minimum of 3 people collaborating on this leading of the center, and a total maximum of 5 people. And then, as I wrote here, the applicant together with the participants are responsible for leading and organizing and running the center. The participating researchers can come from the same university as the applicant or from different universities. And of course, you can involve as many different universities as you like, as long as you fit within these parameters. It is important then to stress that the participating researchers have to be employed and active at a Swedish organization that we have approved as an administrating organization for our grants. So you cannot have a participant from abroad, for example. They can be invited, as Matthias talked about before, but not as taking part in the actual application. You will also need formal letters of support for all the participants. That is the applicant and the participants, where there in the call text we have a template for how this should look, and the letter of support should be signed by someone from the university, saying that they support the application and that they commit to the co-financing that we require for this grant. And as Matthias mentioned before, then there are no restrictions for what other grants you can have from the SRC or other sources at the same time as you apply for the Center of Excellence. So what can you use the money for? You can use the grant for costs associated with the program activities. That is, for example, cost for administrative support for the center and the program activities. You can use money for paying for travel and housing for those who participate in the program. Cost for graduate schools, and then salary for the international visiting researchers or the junior researchers that you recruit to the center. And to use the grant for salary for these people, they need to have at least 30% activity level in the center. Then you can use the money for their salary. And then you can apply for between 4 and 6 million per year for 5 years then. And the grant payment will be beginning in January 24. And the reason for this I will come back to later. I should also mention that we have gotten a lot of questions on indirect costs, and you can use the grant for indirect costs, but only for those costs that are allowed, that I just mentioned here. And I will move to another slide, and hopefully this will be more clear. So here are a few things you cannot use the grant for. You cannot use it for research expenses, and that is other costs that are associated with doing research apart from the salary of the actual researcher. So if you recruit a young researcher or a visiting scientist, you can use the grant for paying for their salary, but if they need additional money for performing research, that money has to come from somewhere else, from other grants or from the university themselves. And yes, you cannot pay for doctoral students, either in salaries or in scholarship forms. And on the co-funding, then we have said that the universities should contribute co-funding. They should cover then the cost for the localities or premises, other salaries than those of the recruited or visiting researchers and the administrative support. And also, as I mentioned, an additional research expenses has to be covered by the university and not for the grant. And to be clear, then you cannot use the grant for paying salary for the applicant and or the participating researchers. I hope this is clearer. So I will switch gears now to talk a few words about the assessment of the application. For those of you who have already looked in how the application is structured, you will see that this is quite different from how we usually do it. And this is because for this grant, we will make the assessment in 2 steps. And to facilitate that process, we have divided the whole application in 2 parts to make it easier to point to the referees what part they should study. So part 1 contains a description of the organizational plan, information about management and organization, what program activities you have included, and also how you are going to recruit both potential researchers and other people then that will come and take part in the program activities. And this first part of the application will be assessed by a panel of experts with experience in both management and organizational work, and also that also has experience from this type of program activities previously. There will be a first panel meeting where we have a sifting. So the goal is for the panel to pick out approximately 30 applications that will move on to step 2. And I'll say that again. So we aim for 30 applications. And in the second step, then we will appoint external experts with expertise in the fields that the center are active within, and these experts will then assess the scientific description of the central theme and the proposed research questions that the center will address. And finally, then the panel will receive these assessments from the external experts, and then will make an overall weighted assessment of the application. And then submit a proposal for decision to the board of the SRC, and we expect that around 10 applications will be funded. And more details on how the assessment will be done you can find in the call text. And I strongly recommend you that you read the call text carefully. You will get a lot of information, not only by the requirements, but also looking at what we ask for in the application and how the application will be assessed. That will tell you a lot about what we are looking for. Okay, so an overall time plan looks like this. The call closes on November 22. And then the first part of the assessment will be done during the winter and early spring. The sifting meeting, as I mentioned, will be held in February. And then the assessment, scientific assessment of those 30 applications that we bring to the next step will continue during the spring. And we expect to have a decision on the grants in early June next year. And as I said, the payment of a grant will commence in January 24. So those who get the grant awards, it's important for you that you start preparing and planning for your activities so you can get your center up running early 24. So you have a 6 months window there, and this is by design. So finally, a few tips. As I said before, read the call text, especially the guiding questions and the content of the application part, to give you a good idea of what we want to see. Contact your university or administrating organization in time to discuss these letters of support with them, and also to iron out budget issues or questions about how it works with indirect costs at your university. If you have more questions after this webinar, you can email us, as some of you have already done before. The email address is also found in the call text at our website. So now the presentation part is finished, and we will take a short break. I have time 2 minutes before 1:30. Shall we start again at 1:35, Matthias? So we start again at 1:35, and we will take your questions then. Thank you.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. I hope you can hear me well. We will have a few questions handed out to us from the list of all the questions that we have received on the Q&A button. But first, it's important to remember that there are a lot of questions here, and we won't be able to respond to all of them. We won't be able to respond to all the questions in detail as well, because there are a lot of questions that might concern sort of particular university structures, for instance. I mean, there's always opportunity that you will find the answer when reading the text that we have on our homepage. So try to look in there firsthand. Okay, so let's see now. Do we have any questions that we want to respond to?
Yes, we'll take the one that was most upvoted amongst the questions. And that one is, are the junior positions meant to be predominantly postdocs or more like tenure track, for example, where the departments must make a long-term commitment?
Okay, I can at least start with trying to respond to this question. It's a good question. So we don't have a preference when it comes to postdocs or tenure track positions like assistant professorships, etc. The reason is that it's very much up to the center configuration to decide what is most appropriate. And of course, we know that different departments have different possibilities to recruit, for instance, tenure track candidates to a position. So this I shouldn't say that we have any preference at all. It's up to you who apply to form a center around these young researchers as best as you can do. So Christian, do you want to add something?
No, not really. We set the time limit, as you said, for 7 years, and what type of position you choose, it's up to you and the university.
Okay, good. Let's see. Any more questions then?
Yes, there's another one about the extensive co-funding, and the question goes as follows. Is a pledge of extensive co-funding from the host university a competitive advantage in the step 1 assessment of the organizational plan?
So, okay, so I can start by responding to this as well. I think that we have some prerequisites when it comes to the co-funding, and the sort of the minimal level of co-funding is, of course, that there's funding available for the PIs of the project, and also that sort of facilities are provided for keeping the program activities running, and this could be conference rooms, guest office space, for instance, those kind of things. And this we thought was an appropriate way to get co-funding from the university without actually blowing the budget perhaps all too much for the departments or faculties involved. I can't say now that it will be an advantage to have sort of a generous co-funding option from the university itself. It depends on what you want to do with the funding, of course, and how it interacts with the program activity and the sort of the center of excellence structure. I think it's up to the sort of the panel in the end to judge if this is actually a necessity or not for the center. So Christian, do you have anything to add there?
Well, I mean, just that you need you should have appropriate funding to carry out the activities that you describe in the application. I think that will be my short addendum.
Okay, Justina, anything else there?
Yes, and I think this one goes first and foremost to Christian. Can the grant cover a certain fraction of the secretary/economist salary that is a part of the administration costs?
As far as the administration costs, you can use the grant for administrative support for the center activities. You cannot use the grant for paying your general economist to do everything. But if you need some kind of administrative support for running the center, then you can use the grant for that, yes. For that part that concerns the center.
And I can fill in here and say that if we look on international counterparts to this grant type, there's usually a very important component of something like a coordinator, which has some administrative duties for these kind of center of excellence structures. So it's a natural component, of course, to have, because there's usually quite a lot of admin surrounding these kind of structures. Okay.
Great. Moving on the questions. Here is one that asks for a bit of clarification in regards to the graduate school. So the question goes as follows. The grant covers forskarskola, a graduate school. What do you mean with this term? A summer school of 1 to 2 weeks, or a program for PhD students or postdocs that takes place over 2 to 3 years?
I would say that we're looking for more in terms of a program for students for obtaining their PhD, so a longer term. This comes from our other calls we have had for graduate schools. So for those interested in this, I would suggest you look at how they are structured. So we're not looking for a summer course of a week here, but rather a more extensive program for PhD students.
Great. And moving along with the list of questions, here's another clarifying one. The question goes as follows. Can or should some form of a basic structure for the center already be in place, or is it thought that you should start from the scratch and build up a new structure?
Okay, I can try to respond to that as well. So we don't put any emphasis that there should be an already existing structure available for this kind of. It should be open to any kind of initiative that wants to sort of have a sort of reshaping function of the Swedish research landscape. So it might be that this is something that already exists. That we know that, of course, there are center formations already in Sweden that are very active and high quality, but there might also be new ideas around that. For them, this is a chance sort of to get a sort of a base funding to start an activity that might grow in the end. So I think you shouldn't view it as you're disqualified if you're already existing, or you're disqualified if you are already started, or if you're starting from scratch. We don't view the proposals in that way in the end. So there should be an equal opportunity for all these kind of efforts. Christian, do you have anything to add?
Not really. We want to support those who have the best ideas and best applications.
Great. And we have another question that's related to the division of the budget. And the question goes as follows. Is it possible to use the funds for teaching salaries within courses associated with the center?
Yeah, that seems reasonable. So I can just add in a general thing regarding these questions for the budget. It's very hard for us to give explicit and detailed answers to exactly what you can use the money for. It has to be, we want you to look, I stressed in my presentation what you cannot use the money for. This is the important thing. And outside of that, I think the call text gives you an idea of what we want, what we're looking for, and what we have intended for the money to be used for. And you should follow that. We can't, it becomes very much too detailed to answer all questions on exactly what positions can be paid for. It's very difficult.
I can add an example here. I think if you look on the setup that you invite an international guest researcher to participate in these program activities or the activity of the center, if that person then is awarded a salary by the center because they are visiting from their home university, they can of course partake in the teaching duties and be part of, say, PhD or master education. So I think this is quite natural and it would be beneficial for the center. So in that sense, I can see no real issues with this kind of setup.
Great. And then we have a question about the review panel. What will the composition of the assessment group be? So basically the review panel composition. Matthias, do you want to take that one?
Okay, so the panel, if we're not talking about the external reviewers, if we talk about the panel itself, of course, there will be people from actually all over the world. There will be an international panel, and they will have research experience. They will have experience in the formation of these kind of centers of excellence or other kind of similar structures, and there will be covering all fields that we feel that we need to be covered by this kind of panel. So all kinds of research fields. As I said, this is a proposal or sort of a grant type that should fit the bill for almost any kind of research topic, which makes it quite difficult to construct it. And also it's difficult then for this panel to make a judgment of the proposals if they don't have experience from these kind of center formations previously. So that's why it's so important that they have organizational experience in the end. But we will try to recruit such that we cover all the sort of the topics that are covered normally by the Swedish Research Council. And as I said, it could span from art to engineering sciences. So that they should all be covered by this panel. And then in order to have particular expertise in a scientific field, we will use external reviewers for that purpose. Okay.
Great. There's another question about recruitment of the international visiting researchers. And the question goes as follows. Should the international visiting researchers be recruited through an open call, or can we invite specific internal visiting researchers?
So since these are not permanent positions, they are time-limited positions that we talk about. They can be, so you can pinpoint certain researchers when it comes to international guest researchers. On the other hand, when we want to recruit younger researchers like postdocs or assistant professors or of that type, it's important that they are of sort of the highest international standard in the end, and that's why we would like that to be open recruitment procedures, just like you normally have at the universities as well. But for the guest researchers, you can invite them in person, so to say.
Great. Then we have a question about participating researchers. And the question goes as follows. Could the applicant and the participating researchers all be employed at the same large and multidisciplinary department?
Yes, we don't have any requirements on where they should be employed more than that. As I said before, they have to be employed by Swedish universities that can administrate our grants. So whether they are from the same departments or different universities, it's up to you as an application forming group to decide how you would want to form your setup.
And then we have a question about the center in time and space. So is it expected that the center has a physical venue? And if so, does the grant cover funding for a physical venue?
Okay, so this is an interesting question, because I think if you look at many center formations around the world, they usually, at least after a while, form a physical location as sort of the central point of this kind of formation. We haven't put up a requirement of that sort. We believe that you could actually do this overarching some distance, for instance, having the PI and the co-applicants to come from different universities. However, it is of course good to have some kind of central hub where all the administration should pass through, for instance, and that has to do with the organizational theme then of this activity. And it's up to you to formulate that as good as possible. But we don't have any requirements that the center should be either at one university or should be distributed over several universities. I know that the concept of center is rather located, but it's sort of a more intellectual center than anything else. It's not the geographical center in the physical sense. So, Christian, do you want to add something?
Yeah, to the second part of the question, as I said, the universities should pay for, as a co-funding for the premises, the cost for the premises.
Great. And then there is a question seeking some clarity in the terms of the call text. And the question goes as follows. What more exactly is meant by interdisciplinary in this call? Do you refer to interactions between subfields within domains, or to interactions between different domains areas of science?
Okay, so this concept that we brought up now in this grant type is essentially based on what we have seen around the world, that in order to achieve larger breakthroughs, it's very good to or take new directions within research. It's very good to have some kind of interdisciplinarity, but we don't have a strict. I think I mentioned this in the beginning as well. We don't have a very strict definition of interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary or cross-disciplinary. It has to do with the fact that you can create something new from the interactions that you set up within this program activity in the center. As I took an example, I mean, if you have people from different branches of mathematics, for instance, they of course all belong to maths, but they don't necessarily collaborate on a common research topic on an everyday basis. So you can have you can have someone doing very applied math and someone doing pure math, and they can collaborate over bridging the normal boundaries that you have between these fields within such a center of excellence. So we shouldn't stress sort of a strict definition of interdisciplinary at this stage. I think it's really, we can see that sometimes the interdisciplinary concept can be rather narrow in some sense, and sometimes it requires a sort of a wide-ranging set of expertise. Then it's of course more natural to have people coming from very, very different research directions. So I give the word to you, Kristin, if you want to add something as well.
No, I'm good.
And then we have a question about multiple host universities. So the question goes as follows. Can two Swedish universities be involved as equal partners, or does one university have to harbor the center of excellence?
Okay, so there is of course a PI in this construction, and of course that's sort of the natural center point of this application. But of course we wouldn't like to sort of refrain from people being located at different universities. So they can be on a sort of equal footing, but in the end, of course, the grant should be paid somewhere in practical terms. I mean, Christian, you can fill out here perhaps.
Yeah, so it's fine if you want to, as Matthias said, you take part on equal part. Unfortunately, this is a limitation in our system. So we can only have one main applicant that receives the grant, but that, of course, money can be redistributed to other universities, to the other participants, depending on what you want to use the money for. But technically, we have to have one person responsible for the application and one administrating organization responsible for receiving the grant and then reporting back to us afterwards. This is something we cannot go around.
I should say that this is very similar to how other funding organizations do as well. So it's nothing which is particular for the Research Council. You can find it in other funding bodies as well. So it's part of the system, so to say.
Great. And then there's a question regarding to the evaluation process. So the question goes as follows. Will the ones who do not make the cut after assessment 1 be notified during spring or not until June?
Good question. They will probably not be notified until June when everything is finished.
Okay, and moving on, here's a question about partners. So, should or could non-academic partners, by which are meant civil society organizations, industry, etc., be included as co-applicants?
As I said before, those who are listed as participating organizations, they have to be individuals and they have to represent an organization that is approved as a recipient and administrating organization of our grants. That's unfortunately what I can say to that. So if there is an organization that can receive grants from the SRC, someone from there, if they are doing research, I should say, can be a co-applicant.
Yeah, so I would like to underline that this is not particular for this grant call. This is a restriction that we have as a funding body, as a state funding body. So that's just the way it is currently.
Great. And then we have a clarifying question about the assessment. So according to which criteria is the organizational plan assessed?
Just a second. I mean, there's one, if I remember correctly, the name is called Organization and Management, I think. One criteria, another criteria is the competence of the applicants, where we look at their experience from managing and leading research activities or other types of similar things, and there will be one criteria, it's called relevance, that we use in the first step to for the panel to look at briefly if there is a good quality of the central theme, and also I think we have, if I remember correctly, in the first step, feasibility. And all these are mentioned in the call text, so I might have confused something since I can't get it up right now. But that's the main thing. I'll look and get back.
It's essentially correct. So.
Yep. So great. We have another question in regards to the budget, and the question goes as follows. Since the grant does not cover the main cost of doing research, will a large part of the assessment of the theme and feasibility of researching the scientific goals be based on what other funding is available?
I'd like to say that this is not a general criteria. It's essentially, I mean, feasibility is also, of course, also always partly an economic question. I mean, it's some things are not feasible if you don't have the funds for doing it. So if you have, for instance, requirements for a large number of PhD students within the center, and there's no funding for that, of course, the feasibility will be an issue. But this is nothing which is unique for this proposal as well. So there is no prescribed requirement that you should have a certain amount of funding from external sources or anything like that. Rather, I would say that you should try to adapt the center description according to the funds that you have available, such that it becomes feasible. That's the sort of most stringent answer I can give you, I think. If Christian want to fill out, I'm happy to.
Well, for the scientific evaluation of the central theme, there is not a feasibility criteria. That's for the first part. And again, you can find both the criteria and also guiding questions for the reviewers in the call text on our website. So you know not only what criteria they are judging, but what they are looking for in their evaluation. And one more comment on the previous question regarding those who are sifted in the first round, so to speak. Those who do not go on to stage 2 will not receive a notification until the final decision is taken. Just want to clarify that.
Great. We have another question about eligible costs, which is it possible to cover costs for research infrastructure within the call?
I would say no, since that's a research expense that comes in addition or outside of the salaries.
Great. Then we have a question. Quite a few of these do actually deal with different eligible costs that are upvoted. So Christian, would you like to say something about that before I go on to picking up a couple more?
What do I want to say something about? Sure. I mean, we will take the questions that you provide us.
Yeah. So the question is, the applicant and invited participants are expected to manage the center. That takes time, which implicates salary. Does that qualify as administrative cost?
No, as I said before, the salaries for the applicant and the participating researchers should be covered by the university, and is not be taken from the grant.
Great. And then we have a question of the letter of support. Shall it be for each PI or for each participating organization? I mean, if, for instance, all PIs are from one university, is it enough with one letter?
It's enough with one letter if the letter clearly states that the one that it supports all of the, I mean, all the researchers has to be named in there, and it's important that the letter then supports all of them and the associated the co-funding with the grants. So you can look. There's a template in the call text. Have a look at that, or you can have the university draw up, you know, one for each. It's a very basic template. It's not nothing strange or difficult with that.
Great. And then there's a question about future calls with this specific type. So will this call be repeated in the future?
That's a very relevant question, I think. Put it this way, our aim is to have this as a 5+5 year call. So we are hoping that we could make a sort of after 5 years, we can make an evaluation of the centers that has been up and running, and see if they reapply, they can get further funding if they have sort of met the right quality criteria. If this should continue after this, it's a budget question, of course, and I don't want to be too technical, but so it depends on the next research and innovation bill that comes from the new government, essentially. We don't have longer time planning periods than 4 years. Normally, the research and innovation bill that comes with a new government doesn't cut all the sort of previous efforts by the government. But we don't know what will happen after the next 4 years, for instance. That's not clear. So we are, of course, hoping that this will be a successful initiative in the end, and that we will find more funding for this. But it's the general trait of Swedish research funding when it comes to the state, that we have 4 years of certainty, and then we have to take an educated guess on the rest.
Great. And continuing on the same theme of time, the question goes as follows. Are center activities to be planned in the short 5-year or longer 5+5 years term? Do we want longevity of the center?
So if the question is regarding if it's viewed differently in sort of the review process concerning if it has a 5-year perspective or a 5+5 year perspective, I would say no, it's not important. But of course, I think for the center function, it's always good to have a plan of what to do if funding is received for 5+5 years. Of course, I mean that makes it sort of a bit easier to have sort of a thread through the activity and see where you want to aim within this 10-year period. And it also makes it easier for other funding organizations to understand your concept of this. If you want to have funding from, say, to name one, Wallenberg, for instance, or similar. I mean, it is at this stage not a requirement in any way, but it is sort of. I think it's a good thing for the proposal itself and for the work within the center to have such a plan.
Yeah, I want to add that in the application, we want the information that concerns the 5 years that you are asking for funding for. So then, of course, it's good if you have a plan for the future. But right now, we want to assess, you know, what we can fund, so to speak. So you can only ask in the budget, for example, you only have 5 years to put in the application form. So I would say you should put your focus on describing what's going to happen during those 5 years. And for example, there is a section you should state goals, what you should achieve during the period. So it's important that you don't. Those goals will, in the event of a future call, those goals that you set up in the application will be used to assess the success of the funded centers. But more information on this is also in the call text.
And a question about a clarification on the call text. can the grant be used to fund part of the newly recruited junior researcher's research time, or is that considered a research expense?
So with regards to the salaries for the newly recruited junior researchers, we say that provided that that person has at least 30% of activity within the center, you can use the grant to pay for that person's entire salary. But so if, in other words, yes, for that person, you can use it for their salary, even if for their research that extends over the 30%. That should be involvement in the program activities. I hope that was clear. This is the reason why we set a minimum limit of 30% activities in the center. So for those persons, you can use them for paying for their salary, even if they're doing research.
We have more questions about salary and negotiations related to that. And this is a three-part question. The first part is, what about salary for the leader of the center and the board? Do we have to negotiate this with the dean or rector? And does this have to be done before the application is submitted, or can we do it later?
Okay, so to repeating again, the salaries for the applicant and the participating researchers, that is those who are named in the, as some of you call co-applicants, it's an expression I don't like because it's not a formal SRC expression, but I'll make an exception this time. So for those, the salary for those persons should be, it's a co-funding requirement from the universities. And that's why we have the support letter of support, that the university should say in the letter of support that they support the application and they commit to making this kind of financial commitment for this application.
I can also say that sort of the co-funding should, of course, it can of course come from different sources. In that sense, it can come from the vice chancellor, it can come from the dean, or the head of department. It depends on which source this funding comes from. So that's important to stress as well.
And then we have a question about a different part in the application, and that is the ethics section. The question goes as follows: how to resonate on ethical issues, considering it's a support for organizational structure and not a research project grant?
Well, you're right in a sense that it's not a research project grant, but it's a grant that aims towards science in the future, at least. So therefore, we would like you to make those considerations. And this is a part that is included in all our applications. So it's a standard element. I don't know if Matthias wants to add something to that.
No, I think you put it in the right perspective. I mean, if you see that the activity within the Center of Excellence can have ethical implications, you should mention it. Otherwise, just as you do for a different kind of grant. So, and as Christian states, it's part of sort of our application system that you have to respond to some ethical put your proposal in an ethical context, so to say. Yeah.
And going on to another part of the application, and this is in regards to merits of the applicants. And the question is two parts, and it goes as follows. Do you have any specific criteria for PIs regarding their track record in the field of the center's direction? Or will the PIs be evaluated on scientific merits only? These qualifications are somewhat different and not always combined in the same person's CV.
I feel like I missed something there in the. Can you repeat the first part?
Yes. Do you have any specific criteria for PIs regarding their track record in the field of the center's direction? Or will PIs be evaluated on scientific merits only? These qualifications are somewhat different and not always combined in the same person's CV.
I'm not really sure that I understand the question, but I will start, and then Matthias, who's smarter than me, can continue. So we are looking at different things in the different parts of the application. I mentioned that in the first part, it's more about organization stuff, experiences of that. In the second part, concerning the science, we're looking at both experience from your research experience and background, and also whether you have been part in creating, how should I put it, novel and original science. And with that, I will ask Matthias to fill in or out.
Okay, so for the first part of the application, there is an evaluation on the merit of the applicants, and if you look in the set of guiding questions to the panel members, which you can find in the text on the homepage, you can see that there is a question regarding the applicant's experience in organizing and leading major centers or collaborations or programs of different types. So that's actually part of the initial evaluation criteria. I hope that sort of clarifies this a bit. So it is a question that is asked to the panel members about the sort of previous experience in how the center will function and run. And that's, of course, has to do with the feasibility in some sense, that the feasibility is improved if you have earlier experience of large-scale organization in some sense, because this is expected to be something of that form.
Great. And then there's a question about the division of focus of the centers of excellence. The question goes as follows. Is it expected that the center will focus its resources and activities equally on research and education, 50-50?
No, not necessarily. This depends on what the center wants to achieve. To a large extent, I think we would be ill-advised to define this too carefully within this application, because there are ideas out there on how to do the best sort of research/education work within these kind of centers of excellence, and we would like to keep it that way. So we don't have any balance in that sense within this application of this grant type.
And then there is a question about possible quotas for different disciplines. The question goes as follows. Will you consider the representation of different themes when awarding the grants? Or could you award all or almost all grants to centers addressing more or less the same theme, given that they all score among the highest in the evaluation of the applications?
Okay, so in principle, yes, but of course it's a question how novel these centers are if they all work across, towards the same theme. So I think in practical terms this won't be the case, but we don't have quotas for different fields of study. We don't have one quota for humanities, one quota for natural science. We don't have a quota for medicine or health. So it's because we don't expect those kind of topical quotas to be applicable as well within this sort of more interdisciplinary setting. Christian, you can add here if you like, but I think it's safe to say that quotas is not something that we will care about in that sense.
No, I agree. I mean, just to add on, we're hoping for as much cross-disciplinarity as we can get, so to speak. So I agree with Matthias.
Great. Then we have a question about the credentials of participants. Will the credentials of all participants be considered in part one? The call text wasn't clear if only the main applicant was considered in stage one, or if all applicants, including participants, were also considered in the merits of the applicant's part on stage one.
All of the merits are considered for all the applicants in both stage one and stage two. And if you look carefully at the call text, we have one I would say not minor difference to other calls is that we are asking for the same publication list to the same extent for the main applicant and the participants in this grant. We're putting more focus on the applicant, and of course there will be more focus on the applicant also this time, because someone has to be the leader and someone has to have the ultimate responsibility. But I would say that the participating researchers, they are of major importance as well in this call.
I can add there as well that, of course, one of the main ideas here is that we should bring together knowledge from different disciplines, either subfields within the field or between different fields. And then, of course, in order for that to be possible, we need the expertise of different people. And this is best achieved if they all have sort of very, very good credentials in the end. So that's why we are asking these questions about all the applicants' credentials in this application round.
And then we have a question about the size of the center. The question goes as follows. How extensive should the center be? Approximately how many are expected to work in the center, and how much total co-funding?
Okay. So as this is another question where we don't really have a particular opinion at the Research Council. And this is sort of given the prerequisites of this grant type, that it should be adaptable to all kinds of environments and research topics. It's not appropriate for us to specify that in the end. There's sort of, if you talk about the popular term critical mass, that looks very different between different fields. Some have large personal requirements, some have very small personal requirements. So it's difficult to give a uniform answer to that. Also, when it comes to co-funding, it depends on sort of the center's activity to a large extent. So this won't be a sort of an explicit criteria in that sense. Okay.
Great. And there's a clarifying question of what has been said before, and it goes as follows. The answer about paying salary for administration by applicant/researcher were contradictory. If I understand correctly, Matthias previously said that this is eligible, but Christian later replied that it is ineligible.
I don't really see that we have been contradictory, but maybe we have been interpreted in that sense. So, I mean, the people that are sort of the principal investigator and the participating researchers that apply for these grants, they are not eligible for administrative costs in their salaries. They have faculty funding to adhere to via the university agreement that should be signed. They sign a letter. Administrative staff within the department are eligible for paying administrative costs too. We can pay their salaries. I mean, this is the normal way to proceed also within these facilities, that either you have a part-time administrator or coordinator that works partly on different topics and partly within the center, or you have a full-time 100% employed coordinator or administrator. But those kind of costs are we can cover. But the people that are sort of applying for funding, they should be eligible for faculty funding, and therefore that's where the agreement with the university should come in. I hope that clarifies the sort of the setup.
Great. And there's a question about the review process. Will the expert assessors at step 2 see both parts of the application, or should we duplicate information in parts 1 and 2 as if they will only see part 2?
So the external reviewers, they will only see part 2, and we have asked for the information in part 2 of the application that we want them to see. So you just have to follow the instructions in the call text on what should be included in the different parts of the application. And this will be very clear when you look in the application form also. It's how this should be done. But I can also add that this setup will mean that some information will be included in both parts. We are aware of that, and but we think this was the best way we could set up the application for the process that we have in mind.
Great. And then there's a question referring to how things happen with project grant applications sometimes. And the questions is as follows. Will there be budget cuts, as is sometimes the case with project grants?
There is no plan for how this will be done already now, but of course some cuts might happen that we will do it, depending on this can all depend on how many good applications we have in the end. For example, if we make minor adjustments in the budgets in order to fund another center, or if we think that the budgets are too extensive, of course that can be the outcome, but it's not. We don't have a plan right now for that.
I mean, the budget margins are sort of quite tight. It's between 4 and 6 million. So there is the lower and the upper edge is it's not too far from each other, so to say, in this sense, and therefore I could expect that we could in principle at least see some cuts, but it will never go below 4 million. And if you have applied for more than 6 million per year, you won't get that, of course. So. Okay, Justina, do we have more questions?
Sorry, I was reading on mute to myself here, so my apologies. So thanks for pointing that out. What does the minimum 30% activity level in the center for the young recruits mean?
It means that the younger recruits should work at least 30% in the center. So 30% of their time they should be active in the center activities.
Of course, we understand that this is not a straightforward issue in the end. I mean, it's all how you define the center activity in the end, and there will be overlap between the center activity and other research activities. So this is not straightforward, but it gives you a mark to adhere to on what kind of activity we expect, at least from these researchers within the center activity, and I think it's view these as goalposts. So that I think that's the important message.
And then we have a question about stage 2 of the evaluation process that goes as follows. How many applications do you anticipate bringing into stage 2 of the evaluation process?
Yeah, the plan is to bring around 30 applications to stage 2. And of those, 10 can be funded.
Great. There seems to be quite a few upvotes on questions regarding the funding of doctoral schools, and I'm going to take two of them together. And the first question goes as follows. The grant does not fund doctoral students' wages, but are doctoral training costs, for example, amongst other things, arranging of research schools of courses covered? And there's two other questions. The research schools can be used to strengthen the theme, and that will generally require the development of new courses and course materials. Can such costs be covered by the grant? If the applicants develop a new course, can salary cost for doing this work be covered by the grant?
Okay, so first things first. Cost for arranging the research schools, they can be covered, absolutely. And the second one was, I'm trying to find it here.
I can repeat it, sorry, I should have, yeah. Research schools, these can be used to strengthen the theme, but that will generally require the development of new courses or course materials. Can such costs be covered by the grant? To make the question more clear, if the applicants develop a new course, can salary costs for doing this work be covered by the grant?
I would say that you can use the grant to develop new courses, but you cannot use the grant to pay for the applicant or the participating researchers. You want to add something, Matthias?
No, I agree.
And then there's a question for inspiration. Can you point to some similar Danish centers of inspiration, since you mentioned Denmark as an example country for this type of funding?
Oh, okay. So they have this, let me see, I always have a hard time differentiating between the different funding agencies. I'll check up the name here. Yeah, so it's the Danmarks Grundforskningsfond, Danish National Research Foundation, who fund these kind of structural entities that called centers of excellence. And they have funded 127 of them up to today, and there are 11 new in the pipeline. And if you go to their homepage, if you go to dg.dk, you can find there, and they also have some inspirational discussions about what the Center of Excellence is and what kind of funding they have received and what kind of sort of it's everything. It covers everything from astrophysics to music in the brain and these kind of things. So it's a very wide spectrum of centers, and I think it's absolutely inspirational to look at that. So please go ahead and do that. So dg.dk.
Thank you for that, Matthias. And then there's a question about possible weighing of the different criteria. And the question goes as follows. How will different criteria be weighted in the assessments? For example, scientific quality, novelty, feasibility of the organizational structure.
Yes. For the first part, all the criteria except relevance will be weighted together into an overall grade. And in that overall grade, the criteria management and organization will be weighed more heavily than the others. We have not set any particular percentages or anything like that. That is up to the panel. And for in the what should I say, in the last part, when the panel should form an overall view of the entire, of both the organization and the scientific part, then we are looking to put especially heavy weight on novelty and originality on that criteria.
Great. And there's another question about the graduate school, which goes as follows. Can the graduate school build on an already existing graduate research school, for instance, one that is formed as an outcome of a strategic research area? Or does it have to be a brand new and independent graduate school?
There is no particular requirement that it should be a brand new research school. It could be part of an existing structure. I mean, just as researchers themselves that take part in this activity is also part of a existing structure in some sense. So also, I mean, in fairness, because we have this discrepancy between allowing research school but not funding PhD students, it is of course a good thing if there is other funds available for PhD students, for instance, and that of course could tie into previously existing research school. So.
Great. And there's a question about eligibility. So, can you give the grant to 2 centers within the same university?
Yes. That's a short answer. Yes.
Great. And then about the recruitments. Do the young researchers have to be identified before the grant application or recruitment once funding is available? Sorry. So do the young researchers have to be identified before the grant application, or can they be recruited once funding is available?
They don't have to be identified before. You don't have to name names, but you should state in the application what you want to use the money for. What the plan is for. I mean, what the components, what we call it, should be described in the applications. We're aiming for a research school. We want to recruit younger scientists, or we want to do both, or whatever it is. It should be described in the application, but you don't have to name names for the younger researchers. If you want to invite someone and you know who you want to invite, of course, that's valuable information when we're talking about international visiting scientists and things like that.
And then we have a clarifying question about the letter of support. Is it possible to add text in the template, such as why this center is important for the university, why the management supports it? Moreover, can the letter of support be signed by anyone else than the head of department, such as president or vice president of university?
So first, as to the content of the letter of support, there is a template and it states what we want, we don't want. I think we even say that nothing else than we ask for should be added. So that's the first part. Whether as to who should sign the letter of support is up to you to find the right person at the university, because we cannot. It has to be a person who has the authority to make those commitments that we're asking for, and we can't. That can be a different person in different universities. So that's something you have to check out within your university.
Great. And another question of the content of the research center. So is it required that the center has educational activities, or could it be a research-only center, including research done by PhD students?
So teaching and educational activities within a center structure like this could be of many forms. It could be, for instance, it's a strength if it has this kind of component, I would say. And that goes back to the text from the Research and Innovation Bill, of course. But if you look on these kind of centers around the world, of course, people doing master thesis, that's also education and teaching. So it can be up to that level, of course. It doesn't have to be some of the basic courses that are dealt with, say, in the first year of an education or something like that. It can be bordering to PhD, etc. So having a good plan for that part is, of course, a strength.
Great. And I think this question is related to the review panel again, but I might be mistaken. Here is how it goes. Will there be external experts that cover all areas of research that is included in the center? And will there also be an interview with the main applicant as part of the assessment process?
So we are aiming, I mean, this is a difficult question. We will not have any interviews with the main applicant, but we will ask the review panel to identify for each application that goes on to the second stage what type of expertise they would like to review the application. And we think that we're looking for, we'll have 2 to 3 external experts, at least 2 for each application. One has to understand that there's also a limit to administrative resources that can be put into something like this. So, but 2 to 3 external experts on each application.
And then we have a question about the terms and conditions of the grant regarding to international guest researchers. The question goes as follows. Can the international guest researchers be paid at their home universities abroad rather than employing them in Sweden, which is often unattractive for senior researchers?
This was a difficult question, I think, to answer. I think in general, we would like to for people to have employment in Sweden, but this is something that I think we will leave to the respective university to decide exactly how they should do this. I can't answer if you need a more detailed answer, please email and you will get an answer that way. I can't give you more than that right now. Sorry.
Thank you, Christian. I'm trying to find not detail to the budget questions. So here's another one about the review process. Do the external experts read only one application or more?
So this, of course, will depend on what subjects the applications cover, and whether there are more than one application for that fits an external expert's expertise. If we can, of course, we would like them to read more than one application, but we can't promise anything.
Great. And then there's a question about the focus of the call, and it goes as follows. It is focused in the goals that developing new research field. Is it of benefit to have participating researchers that have established collaborations already, or is it possible to have new collaborations around this new theme?
I would say that that's up to you as well. So, I mean, if you find that established collaborations are the most beneficial for the center formation, then go ahead. I think we shouldn't dictate any of that. But if you see that you're taking a direction where you need competence from other fields, for instance, then of course new collaboration partners is essential, and then you should aim for that, or a mix of this, of course. It's usually, I mean, if you're trying to evoke sort of a new research team within Swedish research, it's most likely that you would benefit from researchers that are not your current collaborators, but this is not in any way a necessity, as I can see it. So it's up to you as an applicant in the end. You don't put any sort of direct value in that respect to this.
Great. And there's another question about the budget. So regarding the higher institution covering the cost for premises, can the cost be covered by the applicant's other grants, or is it mandatory that the host institution formally covers the expenses?
So basically, what's important to us is that you don't use the grants for costs that we don't allow you to use them for. How you cover the costs for premises, other than taking it out of the grant, I mean, that's up to you, I would say.
Great. Continuing on the same theme, is there a minimum level of co-funding from the university in percentages or in crowns? And which collaboration between university, I'll give the example. So is there a minimum level of co-funding from the university? Can, amongst other things, premises supplied by university HOSP be regarded as eligible co-funding?
I'm not sure I follow the question, but there is no set limit for the co-funding. It's all about what is necessary for you to be able to carry out the activities that you plan. So there is a budget for the grant. We say that these types of costs you can use the grant for, others you cannot. And for those costs that you cannot use the grant for, you have to find somewhere else. If you we say that it should be in the co-funding from the university, that they should supply these things, but we're not asking for a certain number. It all depends on how much you need.
Great. And there's been quite a few questions about the co-funding. So I'm gonna read one more that covers quite a few of these. So if I understand the co-funding policy correctly, the grant cannot cover overhead costs from the institution. These must be freely co-funded by the institution.
So regarding, I understand it is a question about indirect costs or overhead. So you can take overhead from the grant that is connected to the costs that you are allowed to use the grant for. So, for example, you can take overhead for administrative support, but you cannot take costs for overhead costs for premises from the grant. And I can't tell you, or we can't tell you how this should be solved at your individual university. We can only say that these are the rules, and you have to obey them. The lack for another word.
Great. And there's another recurring question about the budget and eligible costs again. And the question goes as follows. Can I please ask you to confirm that the function of coordinator can be covered by the grant? That's a leading question. So the question could be, can the function of the coordinator be covered by the grant?
Well,
I can respond. So the cost for the coordinator can be covered by the grant if the coordinator is not one of the applicants. Hope that was clear. So if you have an administrative staff member that is assigned to be coordinator, you can cover the cost for that coordination by this grant. But the people that are the applicants, in the proposal, they are supposed to be covered by the university at hand. So hope that was clarifying.
Thank you, Matthias. And we have a question that goes as follows. In the call text, the intention of the call is for Swedish research to be remaining leading internationally, and that the call shall enable new research fields. Does this mean that the new research fields shall relate to existing world-leading research?
No, not necessarily. It can also be a founding, sort of say, a program of new research directions. And this is, of course, important that we allow this kind of new ideas to seep through this sort of regular funding schemes that we have. So it's not necessary that it's sort of following along the lines of world-leading research in other places. But it could, of course, do that as well. So, but it's not a requirement. Okay, I think we are running out of time, and we have also responded to quite a lot of questions now. So first of all, I would like to say thank you to all people participating here. It's extremely valuable to have your input in terms of these questions, because it really shows us where we have not been able to clarify our points concerning these grants or the application procedure or the review process, etc. So it's really good to have this opportunity. So I thank you very much for your input concerning this. It's most valuable. And concerning further questions about this, first of all, I refer you to the text on the homepage, and if you want to. You read it carefully, and you can discuss with your research fellows at the universities that you want to apply with. Otherwise, if you find that there are things that need to be clarified, you're welcome to send us questions via email, and we will try to respond as fast as we can on these concerning these questions. So I hope that was helpful for you as well. And if nothing else, I say that we close this session for today, and we look forward to seeing all of your applications coming in. It's really exciting to hear that there's so many people interested in this. Okay, good. Anyone else? Christian, you want to fill out, or should we just say bye-bye?
No, I should just say thank you for taking part in this and submitting your questions. I hope you are somewhat satisfied with the answers, and good luck with the applications.
Okay, bye-bye then. Have a nice day.